We still are looking at violation of human rights, but we are now going to move to Asia, more specifically Pakistan. The title is Pakistan, notably the situation of human rights defenders and the death penalty. I will give the floor first to the authors of the resolution. There are 6 authors. The first one is Mr. Skripek. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. President, dear colleagues. I am very glad this debate is taking place. The situation regarding human rights in Pakistan is very difficult. Ethnic and religious minorities experience huge difficulties if they are or think differently than the government or majority of the Pakistani people. Several minority people were killed, persecuted, without being protected by the government. One issue I want to highlight in particular, the so-called blasphemy laws. I want to ask the High Commissioner to urge the government of Pakistan to review these laws, or even better, to abolish them. These laws are wide open to misuse or as tools for setting personal vendettas and oppress minorities. The Pakistani government therefore should make sure as well that until the laws are revised, people will not suffer by them for false purposes. Thank you very much for listening.
Dziękuję, Panie Skripek. Next author, Madame Jean Lambert. I see she's absent still. And now, Madame Soraya Post, take the floor, please. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In these days, many of us have written something on social media that we have later come to regret. That can be a worry, not least if you are a politician. In some places, however, it can mean that you put your life at stake. A man has just been sentenced to death in Pakistan for insulting the Prophet on Facebook. Of 50 Muslim-majority countries around the world, only 13, including Pakistan, have a death penalty for blasphemy. Islam is a religion of peace, not of death. We welcome the Pakistani government's decision to adopt a human rights action plan. We call on them to repeal capital punishment for blasphemy and immediately release all prisoners held on these charges. Only a country that allows people to speak out freely can truly be called righteous. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Post. Next rapporteur, Deputy Jozo Radoš. Take the floor, please. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Death penalty and blasphemy law in Pakistan hits most hardly journalists and human rights activists, as well as members of ethnic minorities. It is very worrying that among victims of this policy and legislation are people who are underage. I would like to turn your attention to the fact that Pakistani government is doing a crackdown on Twitter and Facebook to discover the identity of the users of these platforms so that people can be charged with blasphemy and possibly be sentenced to death. I welcome the action plan for human rights in Pakistan. I hope that it will be helpful in improving human rights in Pakistan and to solve the issue of blasphemy law and death penalty in Pakistan.
Next speaker, Deputy Miguel Urban Crespo. 2 minutes, take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, President. From the tragic attacks in December 2014, where more than 100 people died, most of them young boys and girls and children, Pakistan activated its national anti-terrorism plan. Among other things, it includes applying the death penalty to terrorists and terrorist offences. We have seen how this umbrella terrorism offence includes all sorts of cases, and the Pakistani government is using it to persecute people. Baba Jan and another 12 demonstrators is a perfect example of that. They were all sentenced to death by the anti-terrorism court. We would like to send our greetings to them and show our support. In 2008, there was a moratorium which stayed executions of civilians, but since 2015, the moratorium was put on hold in the case of all capital offences. So, from here in the European Parliament, we want to demand fair trials and the release of political activists that are languishing in jail unfairly, for example, Mr. Baba Jan, and we are in favor of the complete abolition of the death penalty. As we see it, this means that the EU's behavior is shameful because it is allowing Pakistan to be one of the 8 countries that benefit from the GSP system. This gives them preferential tariffs as long as these countries respect human rights. But Pakistan does not respect human rights. The monitoring system and the GSP are being called into question once again. I'm sure that this system has helped a lot of merchants and companies do well. We know that a lot of companies import textiles from Pakistan, and I'm sure they benefit from this framework. But what is intolerable is that the Commission has turned a blind eye because of this. They're turning a blind eye to the systematic breach of human rights in Pakistan. This cannot continue this way.
Muchas gracias, señor diputado Urban Crespo. And now, last but not least, rapporteur, Deputy Tune Kelam. 1 minute, take the floor, please.
Dziękuję bardzo, Presidency. Commissioner, Pakistan is an important partner for the EU. However, this Parliament is seriously concerned about the human rights situation, especially about the number of executions after Pakistan reinstated the death penalty. Most alarming is a use or rather misuse of so-called blasphemy law, which carries a mandatory death penalty. On June 10th, Pakistani court passed a death sentence to Taimur Rabwah for committing blasphemy on Facebook. We call on Pakistani authorities to introduce some immediate measures that could reverse this present trend. First, halt executions on any offence other than intentional killing. Second, stop executing juvenile offenders. Third, providing moratorium on executions on those whose appeals are pending. And fourth, to reinstate moratorium on all executions as soon as possible. To provide also maximum state guarantees for normal work of journalists, NGOs and human rights defenders. Thank you very much.
Aita means thank you in Estonian. Now, time for representatives of political groups. As first, on behalf of EPP, pan poslanec Jiří Pospíšil. 1 minutu, prosím.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. I want to strongly endorse this resolution which criticizes the abuse of capital punishment in Pakistan. I've always fought against capital punishment, and I'm glad that the EU has this philosophy and that it criticizes use and abuse of capital punishment in many countries around the world. And Pakistan not only withdrew from the moratorium and started using capital punishment again, but originally it wanted to use it only against the most serious crimes like terrorism and murders. But now it is being abused for political aims, such as the so-called blasphemy. We also have to criticize the act against blasphemy, which has been mentioned several times during this meeting. It is aimed against freedom of speech, and if Pakistan wants to remain a partner of the EU in the future and have a privileged position, it has to cease abusing human rights in their country. Thank you.
Pan poslanec Pospíšil. On behalf of SND Group, Madam Nina Gill, take the floor, please, 1 minute.
In 2014, the EU allowed Pakistan access to GSP+, an exceptional tool to help kick-start the economy and crucially encourages progress on improving human rights. It has proved its value in many countries, but I question whether this is the case in Pakistan. A delegation of the Parliament visited Pakistan in April, and from our meetings with government officials and civil society, it became glaringly clear that a lack of rule of law permeates Pakistani society and human rights are violated instead of advanced. In March, military courts that can try civilians were reinstated for 2 more years. Basic rights of foreigners brought to trial are trampled on, with no access to consular rights. People who work for NGOs face harassment, arrest, or worse, death. How many people are on death row under the vague blasphemy laws? We do not know because there is no transparency. Anyone going about their business can be accused of blasphemy, who are then lynched by mobs. Those who belong to vulnerable groups like the Ahmadis live their lives in fear with no democratic rights, yet the government fails to protect them. It is high time to see real progress on human rights and strengthening of civil judiciary in Pakistan. If not, GSP Plus has to be reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Gill. And next speaker on behalf of ECR Group, Deputy Sayed Karim. 1 minute, take a floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our non-legislative and non-binding resolutions quite often lead to complaints from third countries of factual inaccuracies. Today I intend to concentrate only on one aspect of what is in the resolution and do not in any way seek to take away from some of the very accurate comments that have been made by colleagues, whilst recognises that there are various inaccuracies as well. Any consideration by an independent and informed eye of this resolution actually betrays an acceptance that external and externally sponsored internal actors in Pakistan are facilitating the terrorist targeting of innocent civilians. And the people of Pakistan have carried a very heavy burden on behalf of the international community for a very long time, sometimes on very weak shoulders. But it remains the case that our EU policy to support Pakistan in facing the challenges of terrorism and the people of Pakistan remains the right approach.
Thank you, Deputy Karim. Do you accept blue card from Madame Grappini? Okay. Madame Grappini, take a floor, please. Half a minute, please.
Stimate coleg, mă bucur că ați vorbit de...
Yes, thank you, colleague. I'm very pleased that you've talked about the Pakistani people, because often we confuse the citizens of the people with the government of that country and the decisions they take. This resolution is necessary. I have a question for you. Do you think that the life of one person is more important than justice, or the other way around? Do you think there should still be the death penalty in Pakistan so that innocent people end up losing their lives because of what the governments are doing?
Mr. Karim.
Mr. President, when a certain mindset of individual attacks and maims and kills European citizens in Paris, we all say that is wrong. But I say to you, colleagues, this: that mindset of individuals, when they attack us for our values. And it is that same mindset that then attacks innocent children in Peshawar. If we have the right to stand by our values, we must stand by those innocent children when they are attacked as well.
Thank you, Mr. Karim. On behalf of the EFDD Group, Onorevole Fabio Massimo Castaldo, 1 minuto, per favore.
Grazie. Thank you, President. As we all know, the moratorium on the death sentence in Pakistan has been abandoned for some time now. Pakistan is one of the countries with the largest population on death row in the world, more than 8,000 people. Article 295 of the Criminal Code still provides for it, the famous law on blasphemy, which is frequently invoked so as to deal with issues which aren't actually related to religion, but which are used to persecute innocent people, political dissidents, NGOs, and so on. Moreover, social media has also illustrated a new black page in the country's history. Recently, the President ordered the removal of all pages described as blasphemy from internet pages and told the operators to inform them who they were. Recently, a 23-year-old journalist was lynched, Masal Khan, after being accused of publishing blasphemous information. So Pakistan should behave in a democratic way. It should reinstate the moratorium on the death penalty and ensure that legislation on blasphemy be reviewed. There are too many loopholes and too many black pages in that legislation.
Grazie, Honorable Castaldo.
Thank you, Mr. Castaldo.
On behalf of non-attach, Esis Vouleftis, Gorgios Epitideos, Parakalo.
Mr. Georgios Epitidios, you have 1 minute, sir. Thank you very much, President. Pakistan is one of the countries that the EU cooperates with within the framework of a 5-year plan, and Pakistan is also included in the GSP Plus system, the General System of Preferences. Despite this, the government of the country violates human rights, persecutes human rights defenders, various NGOs, journalists, bloggers, and anyone that criticizes. Even worse, its legislation includes the death penalty, which is applied even after flawed trials within the framework of the blasphemy law. Pakistan has the lamentable privilege to be the country with the most death sentences handed out in the world. Unfortunately, it also executes minors and individuals with mental disabilities. This situation is utterly unacceptable, and the EU has to put pressure on the Pakistani government to repeal the legislation on the death penalty, to make sure that it respects human rights and labor rights. It has to tell Pakistan that if it doesn't comply with the 27 international conventions it is a party to, and it doesn't respect the principle of good governance, it will no longer be allowed to be part of the GSP Plus scheme. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Epitidios.
Poslanec Paweł Swoboda, 1 minuta, prosim.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie przewodniczący, szanowna pani komisarz. O sytuacji w Pakistanie.
Thank you, Chairman. We have already spoken about the situation in Pakistan many times. We always had to say that protection of human rights is in a very bad condition, and defenders of human rights face persecutions, unfair trials, and they are even killed or they simply disappear. We have criticized the reinstating of death penalty many times, but it is still there, as well as the blasphemy law, including the imprisonment of Asia Bibi. She has been in jail for 7 years, and she is still in jail. We have voiced our support to her several times. I requested the suspension of the action plan for Pakistan if she is not released. In November, this action plan was evaluated, and it seems that it's going to continue, although human rights in Pakistan are still trampled upon, and there are even efforts to ban NGOs. Therefore, I request again, until Asia Bibi is released, until there is a moratorium on the reinstated death penalty, please let's not make an action plan for Pakistan again. Thank you.
Deputat Doru Klaudian Frunzulica.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie president. Dear colleagues, commissioner, even though I understand the Pakistani position and Pakistan's peculiar situation, I still believe the actual situation in Pakistan is not acceptable. The death penalty is a cruel and inhumane punishment that fails to act as a deterrent and risks irreversible miscarriages of justice. I strongly support the call for the universal abolition of capital punishment and on Pakistan to reinstate a moratorium for the full abolition of the death penalty. Pakistani authorities should launch also an investigation into credible concerns of individuals with mental or intellectual disabilities or disorders who have been sentenced to the death penalty. I support the creation of a public prosecutor to investigate and prosecute attacks against journalists in Pakistan. Finally, I believe the Pakistan authorities should grant access to international observers and human rights organisations to monitor the inappropriate use of military courts. Last but not least, I would like to mention and underline as well the importance of EU relations with Pakistan. Bardzo dziękuję.
Mulțumesc, domn deputat Frunzulița. And now, Deputy Amjad Bashir. 1 minute, take a floor, please.
The urgent resolution on Pakistan is regrettable, misguided and misleading. I stand against abuse of human rights wherever it may arise, but such grave allegations as these should be based on fact, not fantasy. The despicable crimes detailed are just that, crimes against the law of the land. They are repugnant to the majority of Pakistani people and condemned by the government. To suggest that the state is behind them, has condoned them, or turns a blind eye to them is simply not true. And this Parliament will demean itself if it supports the resolution. Interestingly, the text makes no mention of an AFET delegation to Pakistan last April, when we were welcome to raise any thorny issue we chose in the presence of senior government authorities, opposition parties, NGOs, think tanks and civilians, unlike similar trips to India. Pakistan relies on our help to deliver on human rights and rule of law, and as a genuine ally and economic partner of the EU and the West. This resolution sends the wrong signals altogether.
Thank you, Mr. Bashir. Do you accept blue card from Madam Grappini? Yes, okay. Madam Grappini, take a floor, please. 30 seconds.
Domnule președinte, stimate coleg, o să fiu foarte scurtă, nici nu folosesc.
Colleagues, just very briefly, I don't want to use my 30 seconds, I'll just be very quick. You think it's some kind of fantasy that there's the death penalty here, that this is not real? You're talking about people not actually being killed here. This is reality.
Time for your answer, Mr. Bashir.
I would like to say that I'm against the death penalty, but if you mention the death penalty, how many times have you criticized one of the biggest proponents of the death penalty, the United States of America?
Thank you. And now, yes, time for catch the eye procedure. As first, Senor Deputado José Ignacio Faria.
Obrigado, Sr. Presidente. Caros colegas, há 3 dias o Paquistão.
Colleagues, we had Timur Resha condemned to death in Pakistan just a few days ago for what he published on Facebook, which was considered to be blasphemy regarding the Prophet. We have 3 years since they lifted the moratorium on the death penalty, and now Pakistan is the country that most applies the death penalty. It's the first time we see someone being accused of blasphemy on social media. So we see how blasphemy is being instrumentalized to repress religious minorities, intellectuals, human rights defenders, to incite violent vengeance against those who are accused, against their family, the people that defend them. We saw this with Mashal Khan just a few months ago. There is repression inside the country for human rights groups, NGOs, and this is something that the EU cannot just ignore.
I think that needs to be involved in our bilateral negotiations and in our strategic plans.
Adesso onorevole Nicola Caputo.
Mr. Caputo, you have the floor. Thank you very much. In Pakistan, there's a humanitarian emergency. 1,300 children have died because of malnutrition since 2014. And apart from that, we also have a very serious human rights situation. Pakistan, according to Amnesty International, is one of the 5 countries in the world where more death sentences are handed down. They're attacking activists, human rights defenders, among others. These are odious laws, especially those called the Blasphemy laws. And it's a shame because there was progress when the moratorium was put in place. The EU hasn't done enough. It has to put more pressure on countries such as Pakistan to put an end to repression against those who are fighting against the death penalty and are defending human rights. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Caputo.
Bas Belder, alsjeblieft, 1 minuut.
Mr. Bas Belder, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. I have a specific question I'd like to put to the Commissioner. I've seen a great deal of documentation about intolerance in the Pakistani teaching system, discrimination against minorities, particularly Christians. Are you aware of this documentation? If you do, will this have implications for EU funding for the Pakistani education system? Lots of schools, in particular madrasi, Islam schools, discriminate against Christians. I would like to make it very clear that the Commission should respond to that. Thank you.
Dankjewel. And now, next speaker, nyní poslanec Stanislav Polčák.
Děkuji, pane předsedo, za
Thank you, Chairman. I'm no fan of the European Union trying to export all of its human rights from our own charter. But as far as the capital punishment goes, it's a basis. We cannot agree with it anywhere. We should keep the moratorium, and if our policy should be efficient and effective, then Pakistan should respond to what we say. I'll be happy if, with the help of the Commission, we could make it happen. I mean, the moratorium for capital punishment and other parts of the criminal law. And we also should respond in other ways, like in the framework of the fair trade, do not use, do not buy from them. Thank you.
Děkuji, poslanec Polčák.
And now, Jean-Paul Denanot, 1 minute. Thank you very much, President, dear colleagues. Well, we know only too well the dreadful mistakes that have been made in the use of the death penalty. In 1 year, Pakistan has started using the death penalty again, but it's done it without a legal framework. We can't accept that the death penalty be carried out against young children, against minors, or a death penalty carried out before there's a final judgment. There have been cases of executions that have been carried out before the trial was even over. So there's no fail-safe when you're using such an inhuman and dangerous instrument. You're bringing to bear a tremendous threat over all citizens, and the death penalty is pronounced for crimes which are not subject to the death penalty in other countries. The case of blasphemy, which has been mentioned on various occasions. So we must very firmly condemn the fact that Pakistan has come away from the right path, and we must ask Pakistan to stop resorting to the use of the death penalty. Cooperation of the European Union with Pakistan obliges us to ask this of them. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Denanot.
Sada Dama Mariana Petir, 1 minutu, molim.
Hvala lijepo, gospodine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The persecution of Christians has been constantly on the rise in recent years, as has the number of countries where this takes place. Reports on such new cases are coming in from all the continents. For second year in a row, Christians are the most persecuted group in the world. It's a tragic fact that over 100,000 people have lost their life due to their zealous faith in Christ only in 2016. There are states not so far from the security of our European homes where being a Christian is the most dangerous thing imaginable. One of such places is Pakistan. According to its constitution, it is a Muslim state which considers Islam to be a way of life and has a penal code enabling the enforcement of the death penalty for those convicted or accused of blasphemy. Now this becomes often a weapon against Christians for many. Accusations and convictions of blasphemy are most often arbitrary, malicious, and consequences tragical. Christians all over the world, and especially in Pakistan and Middle East, will be fully exterminated unless we jointly stand in their defense. Thank you.
Chwala. I teraz w imieniu Komisji Europejskiej zapraszam do zabrania głosu.
And now for the Commission, Commissioner Bieńkowska, you have the floor.
Honourable members, we consider Pakistan as a key player in the region and we are committed to strengthen our dialogue on many issues. I could just mention areas as diverse as peace and security, the rule of law, good governance, human rights, migration, trade and investment, sustainable development, climate change, energy, education, culture, science and technology. This is the reason why we aim at deepening our partnership with Pakistan throughout a strategic engagement plan which is currently under preparation. Still, despite some progress made in the GSP process, the gap between the institutional human rights framework and the situation on the ground in Pakistan continues to be significant. In all its contacts with Pakistan, the EU continues to stress the importance of reintroducing the moratorium on executions. The number of executions has been reduced in the second half of 2016 and the first half of this year. We hope that this trend will lead to a definitive stop of executions and hope that this sets the direction towards finally abolishing the death penalty and towards the full respect of all international human rights obligations by Pakistan. Yet, the extension of the military courts for another 2 years really constitutes a worrying element, and the EU has been repeatedly calling for a comprehensive judicial reform. We are equally very concerned about the situation of human rights defenders in Pakistan. Apart from pressure and intimidation by the authorities, human rights defenders are also subject to threats, violence and even murder by extremist militant groups. An even more worrisome trend is that allegations of blasphemy are being used to silence human rights defenders. Yet Pakistan has established a National Commission for Human Rights. It has adopted a Human Rights Action Plan and introduced legislation for the protection of women and children. However, there are big differences among the provinces of Pakistan as well as strong resistance against any change from religious political parties. The EU is supporting several projects to improve human rights awareness and protection in Pakistan with a total amount of €97 million. We therefore encourage Pakistan to improve its human rights records and we stand ready to continue working together with Pakistan in addressing this challenge. And of course I will pass all of your questions to HRVP Mogherini. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo pani komisarz.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your final comment to wind up the debate. I have 6 motions for resolution to wind up the debate. I'll now close this debate and the vote will take place in about an hour's time. The next item concerns the human rights situation in Indonesia, and I'll give the floor to 6 members who are authors of the